Imagine for a moment that the entire framework of your life is held together by an unseen order, a vast, precise, and unwavering structure that governs every thought, every action, every consequence. This is not the shifting morality of human opinion or the fragile agreements of culture. It is older than nations, deeper than philosophies, and as constant as the pull of gravity. As Emmet Fox once taught, there is a divine law, and at the heart of that law stands one unshakable command: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. This command is not sentimental poetry. It is not a suggestion meant for moments of ease or when affection comes naturally. It is a binding principle of existence, a spiritual law that operates whether or not you acknowledge it. When you align yourself with it, you align with the fundamental rhythm of life itself. When you violate it, you move against the current, and the result is always friction, depletion, and eventual collapse. Emmet Fox understood that love, in the biblical sense, is inseparable from the law of cause and effect. Just as Galatians 6-7 declares, "Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. The seeds you plant in thought and deed will grow into the reality you experience." Love is not just an elevated moral stance, it is the fertile soil in which all spiritual growth takes root. The absence of love is a barren field, incapable of producing anything but weeds of fear, resentment, and division. In this light, compassion is not mere sympathy for another's suffering. It is a conscious alignment with the divine law, a choice to see beyond the small self and acknowledge the same spark of life that animates you dwelling in all others. When you choose compassion, you step into the role of a co-worker with the Creator, a participant in the maintenance of the cosmic order. Your kindness ceases to be a personal virtue and becomes an act of obedience to the law that shapes the universe. And kindness, true kindness, is never an accident. It is the deliberate expression of love through tangible action. It can be as simple as holding back a word that would wound, or as bold as stepping into a situation to defend the dignity of another. Each act, however small, is a declaration: I recognize the law, and I will live in harmony with it. This recognition is not a passive nod, it is the active shaping of reality. The immutable nature of divine law means it operates impartially. Just as the sun shines on the just and the unjust, the consequences of your alignment or misalignment are inevitable. This is why acts of love, no matter how unnoticed, are never wasted. They ripple outward in ways you cannot measure, eventually returning to you multiplied. Likewise, the moments when you choose bitterness or contempt send out a different ripple, one that will, in time, find its way back to your shore. Fox would remind us that the law does not punish, it reflects. If your reflection is dark, the answer is not to curse the mirror, but to change the light you're projecting. Love changes that light. Compassion and kindness alter the entire tone of your inner atmosphere, which inevitably shapes the conditions of your outer world. When you are in harmony with the law, life carries a flow, a subtle assistance, as though unseen doors open and paths clear ahead of you. When you oppose it, life becomes a grinding effort, a struggle against forces you can neither name nor outwit. To live within the law of love is to make compassion and kindness your default stance, not your occasional exception. It is to walk through the day with an inner posture that asks, how can I honor the divine spark in this moment, in this person, in myself? It is not blind tolerance. The law of love is not weakness. It requires discernment, courage, and the willingness to act in truth without hatred. It may mean setting firm boundaries while holding no malice. It may mean speaking truth that is uncomfortable, but doing so from a place that seeks restoration, not destruction. The healing power of this obedience is twofold. First, it transforms your own inner state, dissolving the corrosive energies of resentment, fear, and pride. Second, it radiates outward, creating an atmosphere in which others can feel safe enough to soften, to listen, to respond in kind. The law of love works silently and steadily, breaking down walls that force and argument could never breach. When you begin to treat compassion and kindness as a form of spiritual discipline, something you commit to regardless of mood, you will notice the texture of your days change. Your mind will be less cluttered with grievance. Your emotional energy will be less consumed by offense. You will have more clarity to hear the quiet guidance that is always available when your heart is open. And when challenges arise, as they inevitably will, you will meet them not from a place of inner depletion, but from a deep reservoir of strength. There is nothing abstract about this. It is as real as gravity. If you step off a cliff, you will fall. If you step out of alignment with love, you will experience the equivalent in your soul and in your circumstances. But when you honor the law, when you let compassion be your response and kindness your language, you rise into a different plane of living, where the currents work with you instead of against you. In the end, the law of love is not an external command imposed on you by some distant authority. It is the blueprint of your own highest nature. To obey it is not to surrender freedom, but to step into the only freedom worth having, the freedom to live without inner conflict, to walk without fear of the harvest your own thoughts and actions will bring. This is the alignment that heals, that transforms, and that opens the way for every good thing you are meant to experience. Love, when stripped of its sentimentality, stands revealed as a principle unshaken by moods, immune to circumstance, untouched by whether or not others reciprocate. Most people treat love as a fleeting emotional state, something that rises when the conditions are pleasant and fades when they turn sour. But the moment you attach love's expression to your feelings, you reduce it from a governing law to a passing weather pattern. The divine law demands more of you. It calls you to treat love as the fixed north in your moral compass, a constant that determines your direction regardless of shifting emotional winds. Emmet Fox understood this distinction with absolute clarity. In his teachings, love is not a luxury you grant when you feel like it. It is a spiritual obligation, as binding as the law of gravity. Just as you do not negotiate with gravity, you do not negotiate with the principle of love. If you withhold it, the effects will be felt first in your own inner atmosphere, then in the conditions of your life. Love is not something you fall into or out of. It is something you live in or step away from. And stepping away always carries a cost. To make love a principle means detaching it from the ever-changing realm of personality. You are not loving because someone is worthy in your estimation, or because they have met your standard of behavior. You are loving because that is your alignment with the highest order of life. In this way, love ceases to be a reaction and becomes a decision, a steady, deliberate act of the will that springs from your recognition of spiritual law. This shift has profound consequences. When love is emotion, it is fragile. It can be overturned by a sharp word, a perceived slight, or a personal disappointment. When love is principle, it becomes a fortress. It holds steady in the face of provocation. It sees beyond the small self and its endless appetite for validation. It looks through the lens of what is true, not what is merely pleasing, and in doing so, it liberates you from the tyranny of emotional reactivity. To live by this principle requires practice, conscious, disciplined practice. There will be moments when the old habits call loudly, the urge to retaliate, the temptation to withdraw, the reflex to close your heart. Each time, you will have a choice. You can step into the familiar rut of reaction, or you can stand in the unshaken ground of principle. This is not suppression. You are not denying what you feel. You are choosing not to be ruled by it. You acknowledge the feeling, you see it for what it is, and you decide, my alignment with the law matters more than my impulse in this moment. Fox often spoke of mental discipline in this context. He saw the mind as a garden that will produce whatever is sown, whether weeds or wheat. If you want your life to bear the fruit of peace, health, and abundance, then love must be the seed you plant, again and again, regardless of how barren the soil appears. You do not wait for the conditions to be perfect. You make the conditions perfect by sowing the right seed. Living by principle also reframes your understanding of difficult relationships. When love is an emotion, you see difficult people as obstacles to your peace. When love is a principle, you see them as opportunities to strengthen your alignment with the law. You learn to respond in a way that honors your own spiritual integrity, even when the other person makes no move to change. This is not about allowing harm or tolerating abuse. It is about holding your position in love so that your inner state remains free of poison. Over time, something extraordinary happens. Your sense of self becomes less fragile. Offense loses its grip. The small frictions that used to dominate your mental space now pass without leaving a mark. You realize that love, lived as principle, is not dependent on the behavior of others. It is a reflection of who you have chosen to be. This realization is freedom because it places your peace back in your own hands, no longer hostage to anyone else's choices. And this freedom has ripple effects. People sense stability in you. They begin to trust your presence because they know you are not swayed by the currents of gossip, complaint, or sudden mood shifts. Your steadiness becomes a quiet influence, reminding others, often without a word, that there is another way to live. You model what it means to be anchored in something greater than passing emotion, and in doing so, you invite others to step into that same anchoring for themselves. When love becomes principle, kindness becomes second nature. Not forced, not performed for approval, but arising naturally from the ground you stand on. Compassion ceases to be an effort. It becomes the reflex of a mind trained to see the divine order in all things. Your choices, your speech, your very posture in life reflect the truth that love is not a fragile feeling, but a governing force, unchanging, unwavering, and unbreakable. And in aligning yourself with that force, you become part of its flow, an instrument of its purpose, and a living proof of its power. Compassion begins where passive sympathy ends. It is not the soft indulgence of pity, nor the comfortable warmth of caring only when it costs you nothing. Compassion, in the sense the divine law requires, is an act of will conscious, deliberate, and chosen, even when your feelings point in the opposite direction. It is the decision to see another not as an obstacle, an annoyance, or a rival, but as a being traveling the same difficult road you are, under the same unchanging laws of cause and effect. Emmet Fox taught that compassion is one of the most potent forms of alignment with spiritual law because it refuses to accept appearances as the whole truth. Where the untrained mind sees only fault, failure, or offense, the mind steeped in divine law sees potential, the seed of good, and the presence of the same life force that animates all. Compassion is the conscious act of looking beyond the immediate behavior to the deeper reality. It says, "I will not let the surface blind me to what is eternal in you." To choose compassion is to accept responsibility for your inner climate. You are deciding that you will not let resentment or disdain take root in your thoughts because you know the harvest such seeds produce. You understand that the law is impartial. What you plant toward others, you will eventually reap in your own life. Therefore, compassion is not sentimental, it is strategic. It keeps your mind clear and your emotional field clean, ensuring that you remain an open channel for guidance, strength, and peace. This choice is not always easy. There will be moments when compassion feels impossible, when the wound is fresh or the insult is deep. In those moments, the temptation is to retreat into judgment, to justify your withdrawal by recounting the wrong done to you. But here is where the discipline comes in. Compassion does not require that you condone harm or excuse wrongdoing. It requires that you refuse to let another's darkness dictate the quality of your own light. It asks you to keep your inner space unpolluted, not for their sake alone, but for the sake of your own spiritual freedom. Choosing compassion also means you see your own struggles reflected in others. You recognize that just as you have acted from fear, confusion, or pain, so too might they. This recognition is not to diminish responsibility, but to humanize it. It pulls down the barrier of us versus them and replaces it with the understanding that we are all learning, failing, and rising again under the same law. In this way, compassion transforms the impulse to punish into the willingness to uplift when and where it is possible. In practice, compassion requires attentiveness. You cannot choose it if you are asleep to your own thoughts. Fox emphasized the constant watchfulness of the inner life, the quick recognition of resentment as it tries to take hold, and the equally quick replacement of that resentment with a higher thought. This is not the work of a moment. It is the daily discipline of a mind committed to living in alignment. It may mean stopping mid-thought and redirecting. It may mean catching yourself in the tone of your voice, in the choice of your words, or in the subtle tightening of your body. When compassion becomes your chosen stance, something subtle begins to shift in your outer world. Interactions smooth out. Tensions dissolve more quickly. Opportunities arise from unexpected directions, as though the law itself is clearing the path before you. This is no accident. The mind and heart you keep open to others also remain open to the flow of life. You are not damming the current with grudges or blocking it with bitterness. You are letting it run through you unimpeded, and in return, it nourishes every part of your being. Over time, the practice of compassion deepens into something unshakable. You no longer have to summon it with effort. It becomes the natural lens through which you view the world. You find that even when someone behaves in a way that once would have triggered you, your first response is curiosity, not condemnation. You wonder what pain might be behind their words, what misunderstanding might be driving their actions. And while you may still set boundaries or take firm action when necessary, you do so without hatred. The energy behind your actions is clean, and because of that, it carries a different weight and a different outcome. Compassion is the bridge between the principle of love and the practice of kindness. It is the inner decision that makes the outer expression possible. Without it, kindness can become hollow performance, an act stripped of sincerity. With it, kindness becomes the natural overflow of a heart and mind aligned with the law. And in that alignment, you not only fulfill a divine command, you experience the profound liberation of knowing you are living in harmony with the deepest truth of life. Kindness, when lived as an active alignment with the divine law, is far more than occasional politeness or the pleasant gestures society rewards. It is the physical, verbal, and energetic expression of a mind and heart rooted in the principle of love. Compassion lives in the unseen decision of your inner life. Kindness is its visible outworking. When you practice kindness as a matter of law, not mood, you are no longer scattering good deeds at random. You are laying deliberate stepping stones that keep you in harmony with the very structure of reality. Emmet Fox would have called this the practical application of spiritual truth. It is one thing to affirm love in thought. It is another to embody it in action when the pressure is high, the room is tense, or the person before you is hard to love. This is where kindness becomes a conscious discipline. It is the moment you hold your tongue when speaking would harm, or choose words that build instead of tear down. It is the decision to offer help without fanfare, to acknowledge the dignity of someone others overlook, to create an atmosphere of respect even in conflict. To make kindness active alignment, you must release the notion that it is optional. Just as you would not take a day off from the law of gravity, you cannot take a day off from the law of love without consequences. The choice to withhold kindness is not neutral, it is a withdrawal from alignment, and the withdrawal will show itself in the quality of your own inner state. Harshness may feel like self-protection in the moment, but it erodes your peace over time. The law responds to the tone of your thoughts and the quality of your actions with perfect accuracy, and what you put out will, inevitably, return. Kindness in this sense does not mean you avoid truth or deny boundaries. Quite the opposite. True kindness is rooted in clarity. It speaks honestly, but with the intent to heal, not to wound. It sets limits without humiliation. It corrects without condemnation. This is why kindness has such transformative power. It addresses the reality of a situation while preserving the humanity of the person involved. When you practice it consistently, you cultivate relationships that are both strong and safe, where growth can happen without fear. There is also a subtle strength in kindness that often goes unnoticed. People sometimes mistake it for weakness, assuming that the kind person is easily manipulated or unwilling to take a stand. In truth, kindness requires more inner stability than cruelty ever will. Cruelty can lash out from insecurity. Kindness must stand on the solid ground of self-respect and discipline. It must be able to face provocation without collapsing into reaction. This strength is why kindness changes environments. It brings a steady light into spaces where others have learned only to operate in shadow. In your own life, you can begin to see kindness as the conscious choice to align every outward gesture with the inner law you claim to follow. It might be in how you speak to a cashier, how you respond to an email, how you listen to someone struggling to explain themselves. Small moments carry immense spiritual weight, because each is a thread in the pattern you are weaving in your own mind. You cannot train yourself to live in love by waiting for grand opportunities. You train yourself in the countless, quiet interactions of daily life. As you practice, you will begin to notice the feedback loop that kindness creates. The more you align your actions with the principle of love, the more your mind remains in peace. The more your mind is at peace, the easier it is to act with kindness. This loop reinforces itself, creating a momentum that makes alignment more natural with each passing day. Where once you had to stop and think, you now find yourself choosing kindness instinctively, not because you have been conditioned to please, but because you have been trained to live in harmony with the law. Kindness also works invisibly, in ways you may never see. A word you speak today might echo in someone's life years later. A small act might break a chain of hostility in ways you cannot measure. Fox often reminded his listeners that we are not responsible for the harvest, only for the planting. The law will ensure that every seed sown in love finds its way to fertile ground, even if that ground is beyond your sight. And so, kindness becomes not just something you do, but something you are. It ceases to be a performance, and becomes your nature not by accident, but by repeated choice. You walk through the world as someone who carries the atmosphere of the law with you, leaving each place, each interaction, a little more whole than you found it. This is the living proof that compassion and kindness, practiced as active alignment, are not mere virtues. They are the very architecture of a life in harmony with divine law. Every thought you think is a cause. Every result you live is an effect. This is not philosophy for the sake of debate. It is the structure of existence itself. The divine law does not take a day off. It does not overlook certain moments because you were tired, provoked, or overwhelmed. It moves with the precision of the tide, pulling into your life the exact nature of what you have released into the world, whether in action, word, or silent thought. The cause and effect chain is relentless. It does not punish, it reflects. And yet, this reflection can feel merciless when we have sown carelessly. One bitter thought here, a sharp word there, and the field begins to fill with weeds. You may not notice the change at first. You may even convince yourself that your thoughts are private, unseen, and therefore harmless. But the law records everything. Every seed takes root somewhere, and the harvest comes without fail. This is where the emotional climb begins, where the weight of personal responsibility presses against the mind. It is tempting to push it away, to believe the chain can be broken without changing the seed. But the truth, as Fox might have said, is piercing. You cannot live in love and plant in hate. No amount of wishful thinking will bend the law in your favor while your thoughts work against it. The law does not respond to what you hope, it responds to what you are. You have felt the dead spaces in your own life, the heavy, airless places where nothing seems to grow. They are the deserts formed by long seasons of planting fear, resentment, or self-pity. These are not curses from outside forces. They are the inevitable outcome of what has been sown within. And this realization can break you open if you let it, because it reveals not just the cause of your barrenness, but the power to end it. Here is the break when you finally see that you are not trapped. Every thought is a fresh seed. Every moment is a new planting. The same law that brought you the harvest you do not want will, with equal precision, bring you the harvest you do. It will not happen in an instant, just as a field does not turn green the morning after the seeds are sown, but the law is faithful. You can trust it with your life because you already are, whether you realize it or not. This is where Neville Goddard's spirit echoes. Change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world you live in. When you shift your thoughts from fear to love, from doubt to trust, the law begins its silent work. The effects must follow the cause. They cannot not. The power is not in forcing the outer world to change. It is in changing the source from which the outer world springs. But the rise is not without resistance. You will feel the old patterns pulling at you, urging you to plant the same poisoned seeds because they are familiar, because they promise the temporary satisfaction of self-righteousness or retaliation. This is the moment of decision. Will you keep sowing what has already proven to starve your soul, or will you plant for the life you want instead of the life you fear? Sink into this truth. Nothing, no person, no system, no past, can control the seed you plant right now. Your mind is sovereign ground. The law will work with whatever you give it, without judgment, without favoritism. If you feed it bitterness, it will give you more of the same. If you feed it love, it will multiply that love in ways you cannot imagine. The law is impartial, but it is also generous beyond measure to those who align with it. And here is the emotional break that sets you free. The recognition that your life can turn at the speed of your willingness to plant differently. You do not need to repair every broken field before you start. You do not need to undo every past harvest. You only need to begin now. Every thought in alignment with love is a living seed, and every living seed contains a future you can step into. The process will not ask you to strain, it will ask you to be faithful. You may not feel the results at once, but they will come. And when they do, you will see the pattern clearly. The loving thought that led to the generous act that opened the unexpected opportunity, the opportunity that carried you to a place you once thought unreachable. It will feel inevitable, almost ordinary, because once you know the law, the extraordinary becomes the natural order of things. Cause and effect is not here to frighten you. It is here to empower you. It gives you the exact map to change your life. All that is required is that you plant what you want to harvest, consistently, deliberately, and without compromise. In doing so, you do more than obey the divine law, you become a living demonstration of it. And when others see the harvest of your alignment, they will begin to wonder what seeds they might plant for themselves. That is how the law spreads quietly, steadily, through the lives of those who dare to live it. There is a quiet sabotage that operates beneath the surface of many lives, silent resentments, hidden grudges, the small but constant tightening of the heart toward certain people or situations. These are the inner resistances that block the free flow of love, compassion, and kindness, no matter how well you speak of such virtues. You may affirm the law in your words, but if your thoughts are holding a private courtroom in which someone is perpetually on trial, you are out of alignment. Emmet Fox spoke often of the need to cleanse the mind, as you would cleanse a room filled with dust. Resentment is mental dust. It settles in slowly, sometimes imperceptibly, until the air feels heavy and you no longer notice you are breathing in something that chokes the life out of you. The danger of this dust is that it builds in the quiet, in moments when no one is watching, until your inner world is coated in it. And once coated, it becomes harder to see clearly, harder to move freely, harder to let the law of love operate without obstruction. The dead feeling this creates is unmistakable. You might still go through the motions of kindness, but it feels hollow. You might speak the right words, but there is no life in them. It is as if the current of spirit has been pinched off, leaving you with a trickle where there should be a river. That is the true cost of inner resistance. It does not merely affect your relationship with others, it diminishes your own vitality. The rise begins the moment you recognize that these resistances are not inevitable. They are not part of your nature. They are choices, repeated often enough to feel permanent. The law does not hold you bound by them, you hold yourself bound. And the instant you decide to release them, you create a breach in the wall you have built, a point where the flow of life can begin to return. But here is where the sink happens. Letting go is not always easy. The mind will bring you evidence over and over of why you are justified in holding on. It will replay the scene, rehearse the argument, recite the offense. It will remind you of what they said, what they failed to do, how they crossed the line. This is the mind's way of maintaining the blockage by convincing you that to let go would be to excuse, to condone, to forget. And here, you must tell yourself the truth. Releasing resentment is not a gift to them, it is a rescue for you. Fox would have put it plainly. You cannot obey the law of love while nursing a grievance. The two cannot occupy the same space. One will eventually drive out the other. If you choose the grievance, you choose to step out of the stream of divine order, and the effects of that choice will find you. If you choose the law, you must evict the grievance not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve to live free of the poison it creates. The break comes when you finally admit that you are done being weighed down. It is the moment you realize that no amount of clinging to the past will change it, and that your life is too valuable to be spent feeding a shadow. In that instant, something loosens inside you. The weight lifts not all at once, perhaps, but enough for you to feel air in your lungs again, enough for the current to begin to flow. And when the current flows, everything begins to shift. The sharpness in your tone softens. The tension in your body eases. The constant mental arguments grow quieter. You may find that even your physical surroundings feel lighter, as though the very air has been cleared. This is not imagination. When you release inner resistance, you stop leaking energy into an endless replay of the past, and that freed energy is now available for life, for creation, for joy. You cannot fake this release. The law knows the truth of your heart, and it responds accordingly. But when the release is real, when you no longer need the grievance to justify yourself, you step back into alignment, and the effects will come. Opportunities will open not because the world has suddenly become fair, but because you have removed the barrier you built between yourself and the good that was always trying to reach you. The work of removing inner resistances is not a one-time act. It is a habit of mind, a readiness to catch resentment in its earliest form before it becomes a wall. It is the decision, repeated daily, to keep your inner space clean so that love can move freely. This is not weakness, it is strength. It is the refusal to let anything, no matter how seemingly justified, rob you of your alignment with the divine law. And in that strength, you find freedom, not the shallow freedom of having the last word, but the deep, unshakable freedom of living in harmony with the power that governs all life. Forgiveness is the reset button in the machinery of the soul. It is the single act that can clear years of mental congestion in a moment, if you let it. Without it, the law of love cannot operate at full capacity in your life. You can speak of kindness, meditate on compassion, even perform generous deeds. But if you are carrying an unspoken ledger of wrongs, you are working against the current. The rise begins when you see forgiveness not as charity for someone else's sake, but as obedience to a spiritual law that protects your own life. This is not about erasing memory. It is about erasing the emotional charge that memory holds over you. When the charge is gone, the memory becomes a fact, not a chain. You are no longer living inside the wound. It becomes something you passed through, not something you are still trapped in. Fox would say that the refusal to forgive is like keeping a wound open on purpose, checking it daily to prove you were hurt. Neville Goddard might add that you cannot imagine a new life while your attention is fixed on a grievance. Your inner picture will always be painted in the colors of the past. The dead feeling that comes from unforgiveness is real. It is a kind of spiritual rigor mortis. Life's current slows, inspiration fades, joy feels like an echo from another time. You are alive, but only technically. Then comes the sink, the moment you realize how long you've lived like this, how much time has been shaped by the architecture of a single injury. How many choices were bent by the need to protect yourself from being hurt again. You see the circles you've walked, the opportunities you turned away from, the relationships you kept at arm's length. And in that seeing, the weight of it can crush you if you stop there. But you do not stop there. Here comes the break. It is the moment you set it down, the moment you say, I will no longer be defined by what was done to me. And in that moment, the room changes. The air shifts. The light feels different. Forgiveness floods in not as an emotion, but as a release of pressure you didn't know you were holding. It is not weakness. It is reclamation. You are taking back the energy, the mental space, the life force that resentment has been feeding on for years. The law responds instantly. You may not see the outer results that same day, but inside, something has been reset. Your inner atmosphere clears. Guidance flows more easily. Opportunities seem to appear without the grinding effort that once felt necessary. It's as though the doors you kept knocking on were always unlocked, but you couldn't open them because your hands were full of old debris. Now they swing open with a quiet inevitability. Forgiveness does not make you a doormat. It does not erase boundaries or excuse harmful behavior. In fact, it sharpens your discernment because your vision is no longer clouded by anger. You can see situations and people as they are, without the distortion of the past. You can make cleaner decisions rooted in alignment, not retaliation. And if you doubt the necessity of forgiveness, remember this. Holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That is not just a slogan, it is a diagnosis. The poison works slowly, invisibly, but it works all the same, corroding your peace, dulling your vitality, and pulling you out of sync with the law that could be building the life you truly want. When you forgive, you step back into that law. You align with its flow, and the flow carries you forward. You begin to live again, not the half-life of someone replaying old offenses, but the full life of someone whose hands are free to shape the future. And in that freedom, you discover that forgiveness was never just about them. It was always about you. There is a shift that happens when you begin speaking from the law, not the wound. Your words no longer carry the static of past injuries or the undertone of unhealed resentment. They begin to transmit something cleaner, an energy that uplifts, steadies, and clarifies. This is not about performing saintliness or filtering your speech into bland politeness. It is about aligning your voice with the highest order of truth you know, so that what you speak becomes an instrument of healing rather than a weapon of reaction. The rise begins with recognizing the raw power of words. Every sentence you speak sends out a vibration into the mental field you share with others. Fox would insist that words are not empty. They are carriers of thought, and thought is the substance that shapes reality. When you speak from your wound, you seed the field with bitterness, fear, and division. Those seeds will return to you in kind. But when you speak from the law, from the principle of love and alignment, you send out order, clarity, and peace, and those too will find their way back to you. It is not always easy to notice when your words are wound-driven. Sometimes they dress themselves in cleverness or even in righteousness. You might be technically correct, but the energy underneath is still infected. This is why self-awareness is critical. Before you speak, ask not aloud, but within, am I transmitting the law or the wound right now? If you are honest, you will know. The body tells you, the tightening in the chest, the rush of adrenaline, the narrowing of thought, all signs you are about to speak from pain rather than principle. Then comes the sink. You remember the times your words, once spoken, could not be taken back. The arguments that left a residue long after the topic was over. The relationships that grew strained, not because of the truth you told, but because of the spirit in which you told it. You see how often the wound spoke for you, and how the harvest of those moments came in the form of distance, mistrust, or regret. This recognition can sting, it should, because without the sting, there is no urgency to change. The break is the conscious decision to change the source from which you speak, to pause not to suppress, but to realign, to let the first rush of the wound pass, and to reconnect with the law before the words leave your mouth. This is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the ability to remain in command of your own power rather than handing it over to the very forces you claim to oppose. Speaking from the law means you let your words carry the same qualities you want to see multiplied in your life. If you want peace, you speak in ways that create peace. If you want understanding, you speak in ways that make understanding possible. This does not mean you never confront or challenge. It means you do so with an intent that builds rather than destroys. You can correct without shaming, instruct without belittling, and disagree without dehumanizing. Over time, this practice transforms not only how others hear you, but how you hear yourself. Your own voice becomes a reminder of your alignment. You feel the difference in your body, a lightness, an absence of the churn that comes from reactive speech. Your environment changes too. Conversations become less about defense and more about connection. People open up to you because they sense that you can be trusted to speak truth without venom. And perhaps most profoundly, speaking from the law reinforces the law within you. Each time you choose it over the wound, you strengthen the neural and spiritual pathways that make it easier the next time. The habit of reaction loosens its grip, and the habit of alignment becomes your default. You discover that you can be both truthful and loving, both clear and compassionate, both firm and kind, and that this blend carries far more influence than any sharp-edged outburst ever could. When you speak from the law, you become more than a participant in conversations. You become a transmitter of order in a world addicted to disorder. You are no longer a mirror for the chaos around you. You are a stabilizing force within it, and in that role, your words do more than communicate, they heal. Receiving guidance is not a matter of waiting for a rare flash of insight or some mystical visitation. It is the natural byproduct of living in a way that keeps you in harmony with the law of love. The more consistently your choices are rooted in compassion and kindness, the clearer your inner channel becomes. You are not begging the universe to speak, you are removing the static so you can hear what has been speaking all along. The rise begins with understanding that guidance is woven into the structure of life. Fox would say that divine intelligence is as present and available as the air you breathe. The question is not whether it is there, but whether you are tuned to receive it. Loving action, especially when it costs you comfort, acts as a tuning fork for the soul. When you choose to act from principle rather than convenience, you set your frequency to match that of higher wisdom. And once that match is made, the instructions come not always in thunderclaps but in quiet certainties, subtle impressions, and the knowing that feels like it has always been there. Yet here comes the sink. Many live their days cut off from this stream, not because the stream has dried up, but because they are facing the wrong direction. They treat guidance as something to be accessed only in crisis, and even then, they approach it with a mind clouded by resentment, fear, or self-interest. In such a state, they cannot distinguish between true direction and the noise of their own unchecked emotions. The result is confusion, the feeling of being lost in a fog that will not lift. That fog is the dead feeling, the absence of movement, the dull sense that life is circling but not advancing. The break comes when you realize that the key to guidance is not begging for answers, but embodying the conditions in which answers naturally appear. When your daily actions align with the law, when you show kindness without calculation, when you give without keeping score, you create an atmosphere in which the next step reveals itself without strain. You are no longer trying to pull guidance down from above. You are rising into the place where guidance already lives. This is why loving action cannot be separated from spiritual clarity. If your choices are at odds with the law, you will second-guess every impression you receive, wondering if it is wisdom or wishful thinking. But when you are aligned, there is no such confusion. The voice within has a certain weight, a quiet authority that does not shout but cannot be ignored. You begin to trust it, and that trust itself accelerates your progress. And this progress is not abstract. It shows up in the tangible unfolding of your life. You make decisions more quickly because you are no longer paralyzed by fear of making the wrong move. You recognize opportunities sooner because you are not blinded by cynicism. You feel a steadiness, even in uncertainty, because you have learned that the next instruction will come exactly when it is needed, and it always does. Over time, you notice that this guidance often confirms itself through the outer world. A conversation, a book, a passing remark from a stranger lines up with what you already felt inside. These coincidences are the outer echoes of an inner alignment. The law is simply arranging circumstances to match the state you have chosen to live in. Fox might remind you here that guidance is not an occasional perk for the spiritually elite. It is the rightful inheritance of anyone willing to align their life with divine principle. The path to it is not complicated. Act in love, think in love, speak in love. Keep doing that, and the way forward will never be hidden for long. In this way, receiving guidance is not a separate practice from living in compassion and kindness. It is the natural continuation of it. The same law that governs the sowing and reaping of thoughts also governs the clarity of your path. Sow love, and you reap direction. Sow bitterness, and you reap confusion. The choice, every day, is yours. Anchoring love under pressure is the crucible where all your principles are tested. It is easy to speak of love when the air is calm, when the people around you agree with you, when the demands on your patience are light. But the divine law is not measured in how you act when the wind is at your back. It is revealed in how you stand when the storm comes directly for you. The rise begins in the recognition that pressure is not an interruption of your spiritual practice. It is the proving ground for it. Fox would remind you that the law does not stop operating in crisis. It becomes even more critical. The seed you plant in those tense, compressed moments has a potency far beyond ordinary days. A thought of love under strain carries the power to shift an entire situation. A word of kindness in the midst of hostility can redirect the current of a conversation, sometimes even the trajectory of a relationship. But here comes the sink. The moment you feel the pull toward retaliation, the flare of defensiveness, the sharp edge of fear. The body tenses, the mind narrows, and all your practiced virtues feel like they are slipping through your fingers. In that moment, the dead feeling can creep in, the sense that love is out of reach, that the only options are to fight or flee, that everything you've learned has abandoned you when you need it most. This is the exact moment when most step out of alignment, not because they do not know the law, but because they believe love cannot survive this level of pressure. The break comes when you prove to yourself that it can. When you choose deliberately, against the full weight of the situation, to remain rooted in love, you feel something unshakable rise within you. It is not softness in the face of harm. It is steel wrapped in velvet. You are not collapsing into passivity. You are standing in the unassailable ground of alignment, refusing to let circumstances dictate the quality of your inner state. This choice is not about ignoring reality. You can still take decisive action. You can still set boundaries, speak truth, and walk away from what is harmful. But you do so without letting hostility infect your motives. Your action is clean, and because it is clean, it carries a different kind of force. It does not merely resist the storm, it redirects it. In practice, this anchoring often begins in the smallest pause, one breath before responding, one moment to remember the law before speaking. That pause is enough to keep you from planting a seed you will later regret. It is the space in which you remember who you are and the ground you have chosen to stand on. And with repetition, that pause becomes instinct. You do not have to force it, it arrives naturally, the way a trained hand moves without conscious thought. As you live this way, something remarkable happens. Pressure stops being the enemy. You begin to see it as the refining fire that strengthens your alignment. Each time you hold to love in the face of pressure, your capacity expands. You become more unshakable, more trusted, more able to carry influence without being corrupted by it. And this steadiness affects more than just you. In heated situations, your calm becomes contagious. Others feel it and adjust themselves unconsciously. The tension lowers, the conversation softens. Sometimes the change is immediate. Sometimes it ripples outward over days. But the effect is real, because the law is real, and the seed you plant under pressure is always the seed with the greatest potential to transform the field. Anchoring love under pressure is not an achievement you check off once. It is a discipline you practice for life. Each test becomes another opportunity to prove to yourself more than anyone else that your alignment is not conditional. And when you know this about yourself, you walk through the world with a quiet authority that no storm can take from you. Turning adversity into service is one of the most radical ways you can live the law of love. Most people see hardship as a signal to turn inward, to conserve energy, to protect themselves until the storm passes. And while there is wisdom in restoration, Fox would argue that adversity can also be the most fertile ground for giving because it forces you to draw from the deeper well that comfort never uncovers. The rise begins when you recognize that your trials are not disqualifiers from living the law, they are invitations to live it more fully. When you shift from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "How can I serve through this?" something shifts in the entire atmosphere of your life. You are no longer at the mercy of events. You are actively shaping the meaning of them. The very situation that threatened to diminish you becomes the channel through which your influence expands. And yet, here comes the sink. Adversity has a way of narrowing your vision until all you can see is your own pain. The mind whispers that you have nothing left to give, that your energy is too depleted, that you must wait until life feels whole again before you can contribute anything of value. This is the dead zone of hardship, the barren mental landscape where every thought is about survival and none about creation. In this place, days blur, hope fades, and even the idea of serving feels impossible. The break comes when you take a single, small action for someone else anyway. When you decide that, despite your circumstances, you will plant a seed of kindness or offer a gesture of compassion. It does not have to be grand. It might be a word of encouragement, a quiet act of help, a moment of truly listening. But that act, done from within your own storm, carries a power far beyond what it would in a season of ease. It is pure because it costs you something. And the law, being precise, multiplies that seed in ways you cannot predict. Fox would remind you that service under hardship breaks the hypnotic spell of self-absorption. It keeps the current of life flowing through you, preventing the stagnation that so often deepens suffering. By shifting your focus outward, You create space for solutions and strength to emerge, often in forms you never imagined. This principle is not about denying your pain. It is about refusing to let it dictate the totality of your existence. You can acknowledge hardship without surrendering to it. You can be honest about what you are facing and still choose to act from love. And when you do, you send a signal to yourself and to the law. I am not defined by my circumstances. I am defined by my alignment. Over time, this practice changes how you experience challenges. Adversity no longer feels like a void to be endured. It becomes a field in which you know you can still plant. And because the law is unfailing, that planting will always bring a harvest, even if the soil looks barren in the moment. Serving in hardship also deepens your empathy. Having felt the weight of struggle, you can meet others in theirs without judgment or condescension. Your presence carries authenticity. Your encouragement is rooted in lived truth. People feel the difference between words offered from comfort and words offered from the furnace of trial. And because they can feel it, they listen, and they are strengthened. This is the paradox of the law of love. Giving from your lowest point often brings the highest return, not just in outer results, but in the inner transformation it sparks. You rise above your own situation by lifting someone else. And in that act, the dead weight begins to dissolve, replaced by the quiet momentum of a life that refuses to stop creating good, no matter the conditions. Expanding the circle of regard means refusing to limit your compassion and kindness to the people you already understand, agree with, or feel comfortable around. It is one of the most stretching applications of the law of love because it forces you to face the edges of your own bias, fear, and preference. Fox would insist that the divine law does not recognize these boundaries. Its reach is universal, and if you are to live in harmony with it, yours must be too. The rise begins when you realize that love's true power is measured by its range. It is easy to extend kindness to those who affirm you, to offer compassion to those whose struggles resemble your own. But when you step beyond that circle, when you include those who challenge you, oppose you, or simply live in a world so different from yours that understanding feels unnatural, you tap into a higher current. This is love operating at full voltage, no longer confined by the small fences of personal comfort. And yet, here comes the sink. The mind quickly pushes back, reminding you of past offenses, differences in values, the risk of being misunderstood. It will whisper that some people are simply not worth it, or that reaching out is a waste of time. This is the dead feeling of contracted living, a shrinking of the heart that pretends to be self-protection, but is, in truth, self-limitation. The smaller your circle, the more stagnant your love becomes, and stagnant love loses power. The break happens when you push past that contraction anyway. When you take a deliberate step to acknowledge the humanity of someone outside your comfort zone, not with forced intimacy, but with genuine regard. It might be as simple as offering respect in your tone, as intentional as listening without interrupting, or as challenging as finding common ground where none seems obvious. These are not acts of compromise. They are acts of spiritual expansion. Fox might frame it this way. The divine law flows where the channel is open. Each time you widen your circle, you create more space for that flow. And the expansion is not just for the benefit of others, it is for you. A wider heart carries more peace. A wider perspective sees more possibilities. A wider field of compassion attracts a wider field of good into your life. This practice does not mean abandoning discernment. Expanding your regard does not require you to approve of harmful behavior or remove healthy boundaries. It simply means you refuse to withdraw your recognition of someone's value as a living expression of the same life that animates you. That recognition alone changes the field between you, even if no words are exchanged. Over time, the discipline of expanding your circle reshapes how you see the world. Groups and labels lose their power to divide. You begin to encounter individuals, not categories, souls, not stereotypes. And in that shift, love becomes less of an ideal and more of an instinct. The law works more freely because you have removed one of the greatest obstructions: selective love. The paradox is that by widening your reach, you also deepen your roots. Love that stretches in all directions becomes more stable, not less. It can hold its ground in the face of disagreement without collapsing into hostility. It can stand firm without hardening. This stability is one of the greatest signs of true spiritual maturity and one of the clearest proofs that you are living in step with the unchanging law that governs all life. Love is the seed of transformation, not merely a pleasant addition to life, but the starting point from which all true change grows. Every outer shift you have ever longed for, every breakthrough you have prayed to experience, has its root in the quality of love you allow yourself to live and express. Without that seed, efforts collapse into mechanics. With it, even the smallest action contains the power to reshape your inner and outer world. The rise begins with the recognition that transformation rarely begins with massive gestures. It begins in seed form, in a thought you choose to entertain instead of discard, in a moment where you extend patience instead of irritation, in a decision to see potential where you once saw only limitation. Fox would say that the smallest act of love carries within it the blueprint of something far greater, and the law ensures that it will grow according to its nature. You do not have to force its growth, you only have to plant it faithfully. But here comes the sink. The discouragement of not seeing immediate results can make you abandon the seed too soon. You wonder if it's worth it. You question whether anything is really changing. This is the dead stretch of the process, the silent season when nothing appears to be happening above the surface. The temptation is strong to dig up the soil, to check on the seed, to demand visible proof before continuing. Yet every gardener knows that disturbance at this stage can kill the very thing you are trying to grow. The break comes when you trust the law more than you trust your impatience. You remember that the seed is alive, even when unseen. You keep watering it with daily acts of love, kindness, and compassion, not because you feel like it every day, but because you know the nature of what you have planted. Over time, something shifts, perhaps first in you. Your thoughts grow softer where they were sharp, your responses calmer where they were reactive. These are the first green shoots breaking through the soil. As the seed matures, its effects ripple outward. One act of love opens a door for another. One changed interaction influences a second, then a third. The transformation may spread through relationships, opportunities, even your physical environment, as the law arranges circumstances to match the inner change you've sustained. And when you look back, you see that what began as a single decision in a single moment has multiplied into a new way of living. Fox's perspective on this was clear. You cannot plant a seed of love and reap a harvest of loss. The law does not work that way. The harvest must match the seed. If you want your life to change, change what you are planting consistently, intentionally, without compromise. The results are not a matter of chance. They are a matter of law. Over time, you learn to value the seed as much as the fruit. You stop measuring your progress only by what has manifested and start honoring the quiet, daily choices that keep you aligned with love. You understand that transformation is not a single event, but a continuous process, always beginning again with the seed you choose to plant today. In this way, love becomes both the cause and the effect of transformation, the root and the bloom, the first step and the ongoing path. And when you live this truth, you discover that there is no situation too hardened, no season too barren, that cannot be renewed by the steady planting of love's seed under the unwavering operation of the divine law. Sustaining the field of kindness is the work that keeps your spiritual harvest alive. Planting seeds of love and compassion is essential, but without ongoing care, even the most promising field can dry out, overgrow with weeds, or lose its vitality. Kindness is not a mood you ride when life feels smooth. It is a cultivated atmosphere you protect and renew daily, regardless of weather or season. The rise begins when you accept that consistency is as powerful as inspiration. Fox often stressed that the law rewards steadiness. An occasional burst of loving action may feel good, but it does not create the same enduring impact as the quiet, regular habits that shape your character over time. Every day you choose kindness, you reinforce the mental soil in which greater good can grow. Every day you withhold it, the soil begins to harden. Then comes the sink. It is the slow erosion that happens when the demands of life pile up, when fatigue dulls your intention, when small irritations stack until kindness feels like a luxury you can no longer afford. You begin telling yourself you'll get back to it when things calm down, forgetting that the field doesn't pause its growth simply because you are distracted. This is the dead feeling that creeps in, the sense that your inner landscape has gone flat, that your words and gestures have lost the spark they once carried. Without realizing it, you are living off the remnants of earlier plantings, while the present field lies untended. The break comes when you decide to tend the field anyway, especially when you don't feel like it. You remind yourself that kindness is not something you give only when you have extra energy. It is the very thing that renews your energy. You take a deliberate step to restore the flow, a generous word when you want to stay silent, a patient response when frustration presses in, a gesture of care when it would be easier to pass by. These acts may feel small, but they are the equivalent of watering the field in a dry season. They keep life moving. Fox might put it this way: the law responds to the climate you maintain, not the bursts of weather you create. A sustained climate of kindness becomes self-reinforcing, drawing in people, opportunities, and circumstances that match its tone. But the maintenance is yours to uphold. You must notice when weeds, resentment, apathy, impatience begin to creep in and remove them before they take root. Over time, this sustained effort changes you at a structural level. Kindness stops being something you have to remember and becomes the ground you naturally walk on. You move through life with a steadiness that others can feel, even without knowing why. The relationships around you deepen, not through grand gestures, but through the reliability of your presence. People come to trust that your warmth will not vanish under pressure, that your respect will not evaporate when challenged. This is the long work of alignment, tending the field every day so that it remains fertile for whatever good the law is ready to grow. And the beauty of it is that the tending itself becomes a joy. You are no longer forcing yourself to be kind. You are simply maintaining the atmosphere in which your own soul thrives. In this way, sustaining the field of kindness is not an extra layer on top of your spiritual life. It is the foundation that keeps the whole structure standing. Without it, the seed of love struggles to grow. With it, transformation is not just possible, it is inevitable. Living as a transmitter of divine love is the culmination of every choice, discipline, and surrender you have made along this path. By now, love is no longer something you occasionally practice. It is the current that runs through your life. It is the quiet force shaping your thoughts before they form, guiding your words before they leave your lips, directing your actions before you weigh the cost. You have moved from learning the law to embodying it, from applying love as a principle to radiating it as a presence. The rise begins with the realization that you no longer have to think about whether or not to act in alignment. Love has become your default state. You wake each day already tuned to the frequency of compassion and kindness, and this tuning colors everything you touch. Fox might say that you have become an open channel for the divine mind, allowing its qualities to move through you without obstruction. You are no longer trying to use the law, you are living as its expression. But here comes the sink. The sober awareness that this role carries weight. A transmitter is not exempt from challenge. In fact, life may send you into situations where your alignment will be tested more sharply than ever. You may be placed in environments thick with fear, hostility, or despair, not as punishment, but because the field needs the presence you carry. And in those moments, the temptation to dim your light, to blend in with the prevailing tone, can be strong. You may feel the dead drag of old habits trying to reassert themselves, whispering that it's easier to step back than to stand out. The break is the choice to shine anyway, to hold your frequency steady, even when no one else around you is doing the same. This is not an act of self-display. It is the quiet authority of someone who knows that love is not situational. You are not gauging whether it's worth it to stay in alignment. You are in alignment because it is who you are. The law works through you, not because you push it, but because you no longer resist it. As a transmitter, your very presence shifts the atmosphere. You may not always see the effect, but you feel the flow conversation soften, tension diffuses, ideas emerge where before there was only deadlock. Sometimes the shift is immediate, sometimes it unfolds later in ways you will never know. But the law wastes nothing, and every pulse of love you release finds its mark. Living this way means you become more sensitive to the energy you carry. You guard it, not in fear, but in respect for its purpose. You choose environments and companions that nourish your alignment, and when you cannot, you become the nourishment in that space. You speak from the law, act from the law, decide from the law. And because you do, your life becomes both a refuge and a catalyst for others. Fox would say that at this stage, your greatest teaching is not in what you tell people, but in what they feel when they are with you. They may not be able to name it, but they will leave your presence lighter, clearer, more grounded. And in this way, you fulfill the highest function of the law of love, not only to transform your own life, but to become a living point of transformation in the lives of others. And here, in the steady flow of giving and receiving, the law completes its circle through you. You no longer stand apart from it, seeking to understand it from the outside. You are within it, of it, inseparable from its operation. And that is where the real freedom lives. Now, let the pace slow. You have walked through the entire arc of the law of love, from understanding it as a fixed principle, to practicing it under pressure, to becoming a vessel through which it flows without interruption. You have seen how love, compassion, and kindness are not just noble ideals but exact forces, governed by the same precision as gravity or the turning of the earth. And you have seen that your alignment with these forces is never accidental. It is the result of conscious choice. Pause for a moment, not in stillness alone, but in awareness. Look back on the journey you have taken, both in these words and in your own life. Remember the moments when love felt impossible, when resistance seemed justified, when the dead spaces felt permanent. Then recall what happened each time you made the smallest move toward alignment, how even a breath of kindness could shift the air, how even a thought of compassion could open a door. This is your power, to plant new seeds in any season, to keep the field alive through steady tending, to remain anchored when the pressure mounts, and to widen your regard until no life is beyond your recognition. It is not the power of force, but the deeper, surer power of harmony with the laws that shape all existence. Carry this forward now, not as a task to remember, but as the way you choose to live. Let the law move through you as naturally as breath. Let your presence itself become a place where others feel seen, safe, and renewed. And as you do, trust that the same love you give is the love that will meet you, guide you, and sustain you in every step of the path ahead.